Hey Threadheads, Darren here. Welcome back to another fly tying tutorial. I know it's been a minute since we've done one of these, but here we go. Today we're going to be tying up a Geek Leech, and this is a pattern that might also be known as Tom's Mohair Mama, variant of something a little bit older called the Mohair Mama, which I believe was just this pattern tied without the weighted eyes on there. But this is a nice, fairly simple pattern. I've got quite a few different variations. You can play with different combinations of the mohair. You can either do it with the Uni-Mohair where it's as a yarn, or you can do like body that's dubbed with either a dubbing brush, or you can do just a dubbing loop. Don't forget to leave a comment down below and I'll get your name entered into our next draw for flies, stickers, and some fly tying materials. Let's have a look at the material list and get started. Okay, let's get a fresh hook into the vise. So you can basically use any kind of streamer hook that you've got in your inventory. Today we're going to be using a Mustad R75-79580, and this is, I guess, it's a 5XL hook, 2 extra heavy. You're looking for something with a little bit of length. Anywhere from 3 extra long to 5 extra long should be good. We're going to use some 70D thread in olive for this color variation. We're going to start by placing our thread at the head of the fly and then winding back just to create a little bit of a thread base on the fly for all of our materials to sit on. We'll trim off the tag end of the thread, or you can rip it off if you like. We'll just come up a little bit here, back up to the, not quite the eye, but go back about a fifth or maybe a quarter back. We're going to tie in a weighted eye. This is an extra small lead eye that I'm using here. And we're just going to start by cross wrapping. So we're going to go on the close side over to the far side, and then we'll come under and just do the opposite of that, just to kind of get those eyes set. And then you want to kind of have a look at it from the top and the side and the front. Make sure that those eyes are perpendicular to the hook shank, and then we can go ahead and start adding a few wraps. And we want to go in opposite directions, and then just every once in a while we'll tighten that up, and then we'll also put some wraps underneath just to kind of help stabilize that. And one thing I like to do is just add a drop of glue every once in a while here. And once you've got that fairly sturdy, it doesn't have to be super solid, but you want it so that it's not going to twist easily around. And that looks pretty good. All right, we'll just add a few wraps so that we can get away from the eyes here, and just like to keep the body of that fly even as much as possible. Next, we're going to take a little bit of Marabou and we're going to tie that in for the tail. And for this one, we're going to find a piece of Marabou that's not great for wrapping. It's got these thicker stems, and these are the ones I like to save and use them for tails on flies like woolly buggers and different leeches and stuff like that. So what I like to do is just kind of rip off that Marabou from the stem, and I usually trim off the butt ends there. They get a little bit of curly material off the stem. And we'll tie that down. I want to try and keep it right on top of the hook shank there. I didn't grab a lot of material here, and we're going to just trim that up just by pinching that and ripping off the ends. Now, I didn't put too much material on there because I'm going to use a couple different colors, and we'll layer those. So again, we'll take some of this burnt orange or brown. We're going to layer that on top of the olive that we've got down. So again, we'll just kind of repeat those steps, kind of stack it up. We will tie that in right behind the eyes. Again, we just want to try and keep that body fairly even as much as we can, and we'll rip it off at the same point that we've got our olive. And we'll stack a little bit more on top of that just to make a little bit of, I guess this is comparable to like a thin mint, or there's a few different woolly bugger patterns that have a tail sort of like this. So of course you can make a lot of different variations with this just by changing up the colors, and you can stack 2 colors or 3 different colors or sandwich it like this. And again, we'll just kind of even up that tail. I'm not going to add any flash or anything to this. By all means, if you want to add a little bit of Flashabou, you could go ahead and do that. I'm going to take some mohair. For this pattern, I'm going to use 2 different colors, and it just kind of gives a little bit more of a variation to the pattern. Of course, you could do a single color in this case, or as I said in the intro, you could even use like a dubbing brush that you make from mohair, or just do a dubbing loop. But for this one, we're just going to use the prepared UNI-Mohair, and I'm just going to take 2 strands, and we'll kind of pull all the hairs back so that we're not tying them down too much of it. And again, we'll tie that in just behind the eyes. Again, we want to keep the body of the fly as even as possible. One thing that I like to do on these flies with the mohair is just put a little bit of pearl UV underneath, and this is going to be underneath the wraps of the mohair, but once you brush it out, a few of these will pull out and you'll get a nice little bit of UV blended into the body of the fly. Again, if you're going to do a dubbing brush or you're going to do a dubbing loop, you can add this UV into the dubbing while you're into the loop or the brush while you're creating it. You can skip this step. Go ahead and we'll dub that on really loosely, and we'll take our thread up to the eye, put a couple half hitches in there just to make sure we don't bump our thread off the hook. And then we're going to grab both of the mohair colors, and we just want to, kind of like we're doing a palmered hackle, we just want to take both of those hackles and we'll kind of pull all those loose fibers backwards. You don't want to put it too tight. You want to have a little bit of room for those UV fibers to come through from below. And I'm not going to be worrying too much about the look of the fly right now. And we're going to give this a very vigorous brushing, and all those fibers will come loose, and a little bit of the UV that's underneath, that'll pop out as well. With the eyes, I like to just kind of give that a wrap around just to make sure that you got a good amount of coverage over the eye. And then we'll put 1 or 2 wraps up at the front depending on how much room you have. You don't want too bulky of a head. So we're just going to put a single wrap here, and then we'll tie that off. And we'll trim up the extra mohair here. And then we'll just go ahead and we'll clean up the head, pull all those fibers back towards the body of the fly, and add a few wraps just to make sure we clean that up really nicely. You want to make sure you have a really well-formed head here, and you can either put a little bit of head cement, or you can add a little bit of reinforcement with a little bit of the UV bone dry or something like that, just to make sure that that head's going to be fairly solid. We'll go ahead and put a bit of bone dry on here, and then we'll whip finish the fly. And then we'll trim that off, and then we'll zap it. This just gives the bone dry a little bit of a chance to soak into those threads and really cement them in there. Now the next part of the fly is just really all about brushing it. If you've got a favorite brushing tool, got one of my homemade ones here. I'll add a link to how to make your own. And you want to just kind of really go at this fairly hard. You can see I'm giving it a good scrub with this dubbing tool. And you want to make sure that none of the fibers are like trapping down any of the tail fibers or anything, but I kind of push down on it and give it a good scraping back and forth all along the body. And kind of the more mohair you can get off the thread of it or the yarn, the better. Gives it a nice buggy look. If you get some of those really long ones, you can just pull them back and give them a trim. But you can kind of see how a little bit of that UV pokes out from underneath as well. So I've done quite a few different variations of this. I like this two-tone look quite a bit. And with the heavy eyes at the front, this fly is going to undulate really nicely as you pull it through the water. Hey fly tyers, thanks for stopping by and checking out my fly tying videos. If you enjoyed the video and want to show your support, hit the thumbs up and share it to your social networks. I hope you consider subscribing to the channel, and if you do, be sure to hit the bell icon to get notifications on my latest fly patterns, tips, and reviews. If you have a question or comment, leave a message below. You'll also be entered into the next draw for some of the flies I tie and a few stickers. Until next time, this is Darren saying, keep a hook in your vise. Cheers.